So I really hope that you're enjoying the video on building this chair. It's a great project, such a fun project, and it can turn into an heirloom project that you can do, for instance, with your grandson, your son, or whatever. Great way to introduce woodworking to a friend also. To help you do that, if you're interested, we're going to make available a template set for this chair. That's going to be those MDF templates that I use to pattern, route, and get these pieces exactly like they need to be. And we're also going to make available just a rollout drawing that you can use to place and show how those pieces go together. Now, I do want to say that I do some mission work. I hope you've seen my testimony. And what my plan is to do, any proceeds that I raise from selling those templates, I'm going to plow that into either mission trips that I go on or supporting other missionaries. So it's a great chance to build something that's useful and fun, great woodworking project, but also with a purpose. Not sure exactly what the price is. My thought right now is we're probably going to be looking at about $75 plus shipping. But if you'll contact me, we'll get that nailed down. Hi, I'm Gary Strigler, and welcome back. Now, I'm hoping that you've already seen the first video that we did on building a rocking chair, but just in case you haven't, I'd strongly suggest that you go back and catch that one first, because when we finished up last time, we had just put this together. It was all clamped up and laying flat on my shop floor. And by the way, that's pretty darn important to have a flat place to put it, because if I get this put together, glued up, twisted, that's exactly the way when the glue dries it's going to stay. So this particular piece, I went ahead and assembled the other one because you didn't need to see that twice. I've sanded them again. I'm going to think that you're probably plenty fine without me showing you how I sanded them. But there's one super important thing that I want to share. And of course, like a lot of things that I share, the reason I know it's so important is because one time when I put that chair, I forgot to do it. And that is all the surfaces on this and on my seat parts and everything have a very gentle rounded over edge that I do with basically a 1/4 inch round over radius router bit, and it just gives a nice soft edge. Of course, you want to make sure that you've got that set up about as deep as you can possibly go without starting to show a shoulder or an indentation, because you'll have to sand that out. Now, by the way, if you do happen to forget, like I did one time, you can route a lot of it with the chair pieces put together, and then you have to finish up either with hand sandpaper or some kind of little detail sander. So it's not the end of the world if you forget. This is woodworking. There's almost always another way to do it. Now, just super quick though, I'm going to show you, I think on this one, I've rounded all the corners except this. And I can start anywhere and just go clockwise. Remember, when you're using a router, you want to go clockwise, as best you can anyway. I missed one spot there, so I backed up for just a second. And another thing about that 1/4 inch round over, our goal was always keep the router bit base totally flat on what we're working on. But the good thing, it's very forgiving with a round over. If you happen to wobble a little bit, you can go back and clean it up with a piece of sandpaper. But so that's got all these things totally sanded. There's one other thing that I want to show you, because if you did watch that first video, you're probably going to remember I said, well, I may have some little bitty gaps that aren't just perfect. And I know this is going to be hard to see. There's just a tiny, tiny gap right there. I could barely get my, my fingernail in it. But I want to fill that, just an old trick, I want to fill it with a little bit of glue and sand it. And what I learned a long time ago, it's kind of a cabinet maker's trick, that if you have a tiny gap and you put, or rub a little bit of glue on. You don't want to rub a lot on, but rub a little bit of glue on, and then sand it. The sawdust will mix with a little bit of glue, and it'll stain just fine. Now, you don't want to wipe glue, have glue out all everywhere, and you got to sand it as soon as you get through wiping the glue off. So let's take just a second. I'm going to grab my glue and my sander, and then we're going to try and get in super tight so you can see this. So another point about this, when I was assembling this, I was using, and when I drew it out several different times, I used, so it would be easy to see on the camera, a red permanent marker. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you're not doing this for a YouTube video, that's not a great idea, because I had to do a lot of sanding. If you look real closer, you might even see just kind of a shadow of that red, but that's not going to matter. The dark color, I'm going to stain this, but I did want to say, it's probably better to use a pencil than a Sharpie. All right, here we go. Just going to take a tiny, tiny bit of glue. I'm going to rub almost all of it off. I'm going to take, and this is about 100 grit sandpaper. All right. Now that crack is absolutely disappeared. The sawdust mixed with the wet glue that was still down the crack, I did my best to wipe everything else away. And now, at least in my experience, when I stain that, it's always going to be just fine. So that's a way that we always treat just kind of small cracks. Okay, the other thing that has happened with these two, besides sanding, rounding over the corners, is I did add, there's some more domino holes in it. Those domino holes are for the two kind of rails that hold the seat, one for the front and one for the back of the seat. In other words, this is going to support the back of the seat, and this is going to support the front. And then also, there's two sets here. Those are for the back. Now, I've got one of these backs already assembled here, that I can show you. And in a minute, we're going to cover how I put this together. But there's actually two different options. If your mind kind of works like mine is, sometimes you say, well, I need to absolutely make sure that I've got these in pairs and, they're face to face, and I've got it just the way it needs to be, then it can make sense to wait to put these holes in until you've literally got two pieces, like so. If I've got both these pieces like this, it's a pretty good chance I'm going to be able to get them in the correct place on the inside. What I did, I've drawn all this chair out on this piece of MDF, and so that allows me to see where the seat is going to be. This is one of the curved seat pieces right here. So the way that you determine where the front and back rail are going to go is I literally laid this seat piece down on top like so. I'll make sure I got to get it front or back. Laid it down here. There we go. There's about 4 options. I laid it down right on top of where it goes, and then I have these two, the front and the back rail. Now, these could be anything from probably as little as 2.5 inches up to 3, 3 1/4. They both have a little bit of a bevel on them. And depending on how you're doing your rocker, you can kind of play with what that angle is and the location, but generally it's going to be about 15 inches from the bottom of the rocker up to the top of the seat. And what you want to do is, once you kind of locate that 15 inches, is you take this piece like so, and this is about, I think it's about an 8 or 9 inch bevel on this piece. But again, that can depend. You can modify it a little bit depending on exactly how you're building your chair. Don't panic. I've also done chairs where I had to take a sander and sand that a little bit just to slightly change the angle to make it fit the curve of this. I'm going to get all wacky here, but that's basically what I'm talking about. If that angle's a little bit off, you can sand it and change it a little bit. But the key is put one of these pieces where it goes, which I'm having a really hard time doing. I keep getting it turned around. Then you're going to take this piece. Now, there's 2 marks on this piece, which are where the dominoes are. With this sitting in place, which goes like this, you just lay this vertical piece down and then mark where, and actually I did on the front side, but you mark where these 2 are, and that gives you the location for the dominoes. Now, the tough part about, or the challenging part about that is, you're almost always doing that. Going to be taking your domino like so, and this isn't set for the right depth now, but you have to take the domino. I put a real clear mark on the bottom of my plate that shows where the center is, so when I line that mark up with that layout, I turn the domino on just like that and make the 2 plunge cuts. Now, the other really important part of that is you got to make sure you test where the domino cut's going to be. So if you were to look around here, you'd see several scrap pieces that I've got where I was just, test cutting the depth of that domino cut to make sure I got it right, because you do not want to be experimenting on your finished piece. The other thing that's a little bit complicated, and it really wouldn't matter which way you did this, is putting, here I've got this kind of curved surface, if you look at it, and I came from the outside down. I mean, you come from the inside to the outside, doesn't matter, but here you kind of had, what I did was when I laid the domino on there, it's going to be tough to see, oh boy. When I laid the domino on here, maybe I can show it this way. When I laid the domino on here, I kind of hit the high spot, so there's a little gap here. I took, and it was more like this, I took a pencil and marked across the base, so that established what the straight line was. Then when I moved over to the next location where there's actually a little bit of air between the base and my piece, as long as I kept this base lined up with that pencil mark I made, then I kept them lined up. So a little bit challenging on a curvy piece, but that's how you do it. Probably going to get myself in trouble on this one, but I'm using, let me see if I can find it, excuse me just a second. All right, thanks for your patience. So I'm not much of a metric guy, but I believe what I used for the seat are these number 10, which is the thickness dominoes, and then I chose, so these places where I'm attaching that back to, I used the number 8 domino. Now honestly, this length, man, I don't know. It looks to me like about 1.75 inches, and that, I know that's enough. I'm sure you can get them bigger. Then the final size that I used during this, I believe this says a number 6, and that's what I'm going to put in the ends here. So 3 different sizes. I hope I've got that right. My apologies to all of you that are experts on the metric system and all that, but that hopefully will get you pretty close. All right, so that's how I located these holes using the piece. The other thing I forgot to mention, on the back, it's about half as much angle on the back as on the front, and the reason for that is these pieces have a more pronounced drop down. It's not a lot, but a more pronounced drop down on the front part of the seat. So, anyway, that's how I got to that point. Now, the last thing that I would do if you're going to locate these pieces for the back before you assemble the whole thing, it's the same deal. You take your these two pieces, and I don't know if I showed making them or not, but this is basically about a half of a 2x10, so I've got, you know, about 4.5 inches at the top. This radius is the same radius as the rocker, so it keeps it real simple. I plane these down to 1 inch thick. You know, these pieces are 3/4. So when they go together, you've got a nice little bit of an offset. And so what I want to do, again, I've done basically the same trick. I've sanded these, but I put a pencil mark where the 2 dominoes were going to be, came up here, and I would put one down in place like this. Then I'd put one of my curving back pieces like so, put the other piece there, and then because I've got those marks, remember I'd made, ooh, that's going to bounce, I hope, because I'd made marks here where that layout was going to be. I would just take and transfer those 2 marks right there, and that shows me where they need to go. Again, the biggest thing is adjusting the depth of the cut on the domino. One other thing I'm going to share, and you know, I used both the Domino XL and the regular domino on this. That's a pretty significant investment. You could put this whole thing together just using the regular domino, as long as you use these biggest size dominoes in these joints. But there is one other thing that I want to share real quick. You know, right here's the depth. Hope I don't have this set for something. You know, right here's the depth adjustment for the domino, and you know, you slide this back and forth like so. But to get all the depth that I needed to come down from the edge on these pieces, I actually just took it up as high as it'll possibly go, so this indexing thing doesn't really do me any good, and just locked it in place. And that's what lets me get way back in here. And again, maybe at this point, this isn't a curved section, but maybe you'll be able to see. Again, over there on the curved section, I just put a pencil mark on the bottom of the plate so that when I hit the curved section, it was wobbly. All I had to do is line that pencil mark up with this. But again, the way I got enough depth back to get towards the middle of these pieces was by just dropping the thing as deep as it could go. All right, well, I hope I've covered how I got from where we left off last week to here. So now we're about ready for kind of the really important part, and that's going to be assembling the chair. Sitting here running through my mind. Now that we've got these 2 sides, left and right hand side of the chair all together, what we need to do is go ahead and show you assembling one of these. That's that back assembly. And then the final step after we've showed you how to do this is we're going to come in and put all these pieces together. One other dimension that I do need to share, the width of these pieces and the width, or excuse me, I'm going to say the length of those 2 pieces and the length of these 2 pieces for this chair is 20 inches. For that, I put 5 curved slats for the back and 6 for the bottom. You could probably cheat that. The first chair I made was 18. It was for my wife, so it didn't need to be quite as wide. These I'm making now are 20. You could probably grow that a couple inches and still get by with 6 slats for the back. If you go much more than that, you're going to need to maybe add 1 more slat to the back and 1 to the bottom. But you know, realistically, you can make this chair as big as you want to, as long as you kind of maintain that spacing between the slats. The strength, you know, I'm no engineer, but the strength of this piece, which is what you sit on, I've got to think you could make this 6 or 8 inches wider and it'd be plenty strong. You know, the joint with these dominoes, you might end up, if you really got building a gigantic chair, you might want to go back to the Domino XL. But at any rate, I just want to tell you, you know, there's lots of options for how you build this chair. And part of the great thing about it is you can kind of customize it to what you want. Okay, well, enough of that. I'm going to clear some things out and let's get to showing you how we put this together. I'm ready to glue up the back. Now, experience has taught me that for something like this, it's a little bit complicated. It's a good idea to kind of have everything lined out exactly like I want it. And I'm even putting some little pencil marks to kind of help me keep everything guided. For instance, I put a mark, this is the top, and that's also the face. I've got a mark on the bottom on the face. Each one of these pieces has a little mark that says this is the top, this is the part that's going up, and that's also the face. So that lets me get all the pieces landed, because there's a tiny bit of difference in the curve of this back. So you don't want to get like one flipped over, turned the wrong direction. Now the other thing I want to share super quick, although I made a big point of easing all these edges, and it's so nice and just feels great to hand, looks great to have those corners eased. Routing this is a little bit of a problem, like so. And you can do it like that. You can run the route like that. You're just going to have to do some more hand sanding, because, again, I've shared in previous videos, I'm a router guy. I actually just do this. Again, don't do anything that you're not comfortable with. Another option, but you could literally put this little router bit, you know, on a router table or something and freehand it. So there's lots of different options. But I did want to make a big point. You really want to make sure you get those corners rounded first, because if you don't, as you get up here, it is super tough. You know, the other thing that's critical to this, when I made these cuts, I was super careful to do a test to make sure that I got that pretty much centered. And because these dropped down a little bit, I had to change the setting on the domino also to get them down, because although these aren't going to be perfectly centered, I don't want them up too high. All right, enough of that. Last thing I want to say, gosh, there's always one more point. Because this isn't a super like great strength structural thing, all of these domino cuts were made on that kind of intermediate sloppy cut. Okay, I promise that's all that. I'm going to assemble this, and then I'm going to use 3 pipe clamps to hold together. Now, it's also a good idea at this point to have a damp rag to wipe any glue, squeeze out off with some water, but you don't need to see me do that. I'm going to grab my pipe clamps, and you know, so this is like real life. You're going to see that basically right now I've got the rubber feet. You know what? Actually, this is fantastic. I actually found 3 pipe clamps that have both of the rubber feet. You know, your options on that, if you've managed to lose the rubber feet on your pipe clamp, is you could use a little piece of wood as a pad strip, or simply, it's probably pretty easy to sand if you happen to get a little bit of a ding on that. All right, here we go. Now, I don't have any real trick for how to do this. I'm trying to let a little bit of glue run down each side. And more than anything, experience is going to teach you what to do here. I mean, I know people that will like take a brush and brush both sides and everything, but one of the things I found with this, you know, the domino, is it's amazing how forgiving the joinery is. And, you know, especially in places where you're where you don't just have horrendous structural requirements. All right, so I've got these pieces, and I've got a lot of forgiveness because it's on the sloppy side. I'm going to go ahead and put the glue in this, and then we'll start putting the pieces in, and you know, hopefully we don't make a really big mess on the video. This could be an opportunity for you to get your significant other or buddy next door or something to help you hold this while you put them together, but we're just going to go boldly onwards. If I got a little bit extra glue there, I'm just going to take it off. Okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and put these in. Again, you know, this is like my 4th or 5th chair. Once I get to where I've done about 100, I'll probably have a really set way of putting everything together. But as long as I've got that backup of that cloth, I should be okay. Again, this is why having these marks are important. All of a sudden, it can start to get kind of confusing while you're doing this. I think I'm going to go ahead and try, and as I put these in, okay, I'm going to go ahead and try and put a little glue up here. My goal today would be to not get glue all over my clothes, if I can help it. Again, I'm hoping I don't have glue all over my shirt. But that's what's made me a big fan of just using the original Tight Bond, because it washes off so much better. Okay. Now I'm thinking that I can actually lay this down like so, and that may be a bad idea. Got my indexing mark up. I'm just going to start. Got 1 start in, got 2. All right, it's looking like I'm going to win. While I'm just talking along here, one of the things that I should probably say also is that you want to make sure you got all those pieces cut exactly the same length. And I got 3 different sizes of pipe clamps here. Okay. What I've got to do is I start to put this together. So I'm going to grab my tape measure, and I'm going to mark the exact center of this. There's the exact center, and again, it actually would have been a great idea if I'd done this before I got to this point, but this is super forgiving because I use those sloppy settings. Okay, then I know that it's about 1.5 inches, 1 7/16 in from the outside edges. So I'm going to mark that. Now I put other clamps under, excuse me, I think I put these on top. They're like so. And it's a little bit of a trick because these are rounded over. But, all right, there's 1 7/16 inches. Take the rubber end of my hammer and bump those over a little bit. This should go over the top and kind of balance it out now. Okay, so now I've got, these are 1 7/16 inches up. This one is centered. And the last thing I need to do is just get equal spacing in between there, which I think is going to be around 1 3/4 inches. I may need to grab a block of wood so I'm not making a big ding. Yeah, so that's about 1 3/4 inches in between. I mean, you know, there's nothing sacred about that. If you were making a wider chair, you could cheat that a little bit, but you do want it to be pretty close. Let me just check this last one. think it's going to need to move over a little bit. Whoops, that side's got to come back a little bit. I do think one of the things that attracted me the most to this project and to this chair when I saw that first one in Honduras was just the curve back. It's really, really graceful, really good looking. So I'm just tightening it. These don't have to be terrible tight, but here we are. Got a little bit of glue. I'm going to get a rag and wipe it out. But see, you know, here's my marks to say here's the front, here's the back. Here's all these X's that tell me that was the face and the up part. So all I've got to do is go set this aside on a fairly flat place, let this dry, and then come back and be ready to put the chair together. So I'm going to go wipe this off, lay it aside, and when I get back, we're going to be ready for that final moment of assembling the whole chair. Now we've come to the really exciting part of this project. That's putting the whole thing together. Now, the first thing I want to say is I've kind of test fit and dry fit all these joints, and the one that is probably kind of the, oh, what would the word be? At any rate, I wanted to test and see how this S-curve piece fit over the front and back rail. And originally, I got those angles on the rails from my full-size drawing, but because this is a kind of a curve, and the up and down exact location of those rails might change a little bit, when I actually got ready to put it together, doing my dry fit, I ended up increasing the angle on this back rail. I just put it in place. Let's see, I think it was like that. Held this piece up and saw that I needed to change the angle. You could do that on a table saw. If you got the whole thing together, you could even still do it in place with a sander, but it's a little easier to do it beforehand. But I just wanted to share that. I'm the kind of guy that always gets in a big hurry and kind of charges ahead. But I have learned sometimes it's a great idea to step back a little bit and test fit. Now, I'm getting ready to get started. I've got a buddy that probably is going to have to step in here and help me. I have glued these up myself, and you can glue it up yourself too. You probably just end up with a little more glue in places that you don't want that you have to sand out. My thought process is I'm going to start by putting all these dominoes in place, and then I will bring the pieces like the back piece and the front and back rail down, put them in place, put glue and dominoes in them, and then the very last thing, someone to grab this piece, put glue in it, and bring it. All right, it's live TV. And then we're going to put that down. That's the part that's going to be most challenging because as soon as we flip it over, it's going to start dripping, and there's just not much way around it. Again, I've got a damp rag around here someplace, and we're going to start wiping any excess glue. But here we go. Now, one thing I want to mention, you know, again, the joints, putting this back piece in place, I use the medium, I don't know if you call it the sloppy, but the medium setting on the domino for both halves of the joint. And I'm going to get the right size dominoes in here somewhere. Thought I had these all laid out. I found some. Because that's pretty forgiving. That's still a strong joint. But when it came to putting the rails on, I did use the tight setting on one side of the rail. I may have to get a hammer out here. All right. And so on the pieces where I use the tight setting, you always want to put the domino in that side first. So again, this is pretty forgiving on the back. And the other thing that I want to learn is I'm going to make sure that I've somewhere here got 4 more of those dominoes. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. Get these big ones out of the way. All right. So this is that back piece. And I've also numbered it so I wouldn't mess it up because these are tight, I'm going to go ahead and put the glue in it first. And again, the reason I went, with the tight on one side of this joint is because I felt like one of the joints that needs to be the strongest in the chair is this front and back rail of the seat. Got a pretty good bit of glue in there. Okay, there's that one. That goes like so. Again, so far this is looking pretty easy. I got a feeling pretty quick I'm gonna be at that point where I need some help. All right. So I'm using, just the original tight bond for this, and that gives you, well, I guess it depends somewhat on your shop conditions, but it should give you about 10 to 15 minutes of working time, which that's another good reason maybe to kind of, not be such a bold individual and go ahead and get someone to help you with part of it. You might have a little bit more time than that. Now, I will say that Tight Bond also, they got a wide range of glue products, and they even sell a product called Tight Bond Extend, and that Extend is going to give you, even a little bit more time. The glue joint is still going to be a very strong glue joint, and okay, we're getting close to that point where I'm going to need some help. Ta-da! Okay, this goes together like so. One of the interesting things, I believe that's right. This would have been a good time to have tested it. All right, that looks promising. One of the things I learned from the Tight Bond people is, they say, well, you got this much clamp time and this much open time to get your strongest joint, but oftentimes, the strongest joint is stronger than the wood. So what's really important is, are you ready? Ready. Okay, you just kind of watch that side. I'm gonna get down here and I'll let you get yours in first.
Halfway in.
That's all that matters. All right, I think I'm gonna get a pretty good bit of glue squeeze out, which means, hold on a second. Go ahead and grab my damp rag before this gets away from me too much here. All right. Are you ready for the grand finale?
Yes.
Almost the grand finale?
Yes.
Me too. I'm so excited. I think this could be like the longest video I've ever done. And I do hope, I've tried to share a ton of information. I hope this hasn't been too long. I hope it's been helpful. And as always, if you're just watching this, I've got to say it's like 180 more. Okay, yeah, so I think we want to go ahead and put the dominoes in all these. Got like 180 other videos, I think, at this point. At some point, depending on when you're watching this, I hope I get to have even more than that. And so I always want to say I've tried to just share as much as I can. It's a tape measure. It's a hammer. All right, here we go. Oh,
that's a hammer.
All right, very good. That also reminds me after my carpal tunnel surgery, I said, do not use your hand as a hammer. Mike, we got to put glue in all these. And I said, that's the part where the glue is going to start going everywhere when we flip it over. All right, but I'd rather have a little bit too much glue than slightly not enough.
So let me ask you an amateur question. Why would you just put glue on the dominoes? Why are you putting it in the holes?
I think it's going, when you go that way, it's going to a lot more of it's going to squeeze out. That technique might work. It's kind of like.
I'm just thinking the audience is probably asking that question. I thought I'd ask it.
Well, this is just always the way I've done it. That might very well work. And one of the things I always say, the way I've done it is certainly not the only way of doing it. And there's a lot of people who actually brake with their left foot while they're driving, and if it works for you, go for it. I don't even know if this is the right way.
They don't drive a clutch then.
Yes, that's true. So, and I may just get like hammered by people that are Festool experts. All I can tell you is I did this and it works. Okay, Mike, the most challenging thing is probably going to be catching that one. Are you ready?
I guess so.
I have the damp rag ready. Here we go.
Should I be on this side? Or?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
It's like you're overachieving. You got your part in.
No.
You see, all right, you go, man. You got to scoot down here. We got them all?
I don't think we got. There we go. There you go.
Again, do not use your hand as a hammer. Well, that's what the doctor told me after I had my carpal tunnel surgery.
Is that what I said, not what I do?
That's it, man. All right, so now we're going to take about 4 clamps. Need a little bit more room over there.
Good.
And I'm coming back to you a little bit. And we're just going to suck these in. Is this starting to look like a rocking chair? I'm hoping it is.
Suck it to me.
So, by the way, one of the last things we're going to do is we're going to trim this top, which we've left
My watch thinks I fell. Just a minute.
Your watch thinks you fell.
Did you not know that?
No.
Apple Watches, if you fall, it detects that you fell, so it will call 911. How about that?
I thought maybe it was calling your wife.
No.
All right.
When I pounded it with my hand, it thought I fell.
All right. Well, I'm tickled that this is actually all going together. Great. We got glue squeezed out pretty much everywhere. Mike, can you reach around?
Yeah.
All right. I'm there. You good? Okay. I like the way you did not pinch your finger in that clamp. I usually pinch my finger at least once.
That's because I've done that before.
Yeah. All right, so we have got glue everywhere. We'll start reaching there and getting that. And
which is actually a good thing, right?
I'd rather have too much than too little.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to take, and there's still a good bit of sand that needs to be done this anyway. I'm going to take like a little detail sander and go over all these things,
right
but
we're inside that.
We're now here,
right here,
where I can't see.
Yeah, right there.
All right, back like that.
Yep, perfect.
All right.
Something on that rail right there.
Where now? Oh, right there. I don't know how that got there.
And you got something up here on this rail.
All right, let's. That all. Oh, your fingers are just about ended up here. All right, it's a lot easier to clean it up a little bit now. That does, of course, raise the grain, but if you're going to go over the whole thing with a finish sander anyway, another thing, of course, I know this from experience, there's probably going to be some places where we don't get all the glue, and there's a certain point where you're better off not to wipe it, and then you just take a sharp chisel and cut it out. So, I'm hoping that we can get this on video now. The next thing that we need to do so we can finish this up is we're actually going to put these curved slats in place. Now, I may do like a Vanna White real quick. It's like, oh, here, hope that's not going to get me in trouble with TV rights or anything. So there's the chair from the side view. Again, love it. Oh, I see one more spot. We'll probably be seeing one more spot with a little bit of glue for quite a while. Anyway, this is looking a whole lot like a rocking chair. There's 2 things we've got to do, and I'm probably not even going to do one of them on camera. Up at the top, I'm just going to take a radius, any radius that I can find, you know, coffee can, cup, anything, and just cut a little radius at the top that looks good to me. Wherever, as long as it's a few inches above that rail, it'll be fine. Hope I'm not off camera now. And then the key is once I've done that, and I did it with the jigsaw, then I'll cut the other side, sand a little bit, and then go back and round it over. But I just never want to cut that top off until I can see how it looks with the whole chair. All right, enough of that. We did mark all these with an X, and it centers at the back. In other words, this end's going to center with the back of the back rail. And at this point, all I'm going to do is nail them in place with some about 1.5 inch 18 gauge brads. One thing about 18 gauge brads is, you know, they're all galvanized. It's like any 18 gauge braid you buy, as far as I know anyhow, it's going to be galvanized. And so all it's got to do is hold it in place. Now, you can also buy those in stainless steel if you want to be just super sure. I had 8 3/4. Man, it looks like about 8 7/8 to each side for this chair is going to be okay. The hard one to get in is the first one. Now, I got one nail in it. Well, that's great. I'll let it slip a little bit. So I'm going to make an indexing mark about right there, which again, I could have done that originally. All right, let's try it again. 8 7/8. 8 7/8. Time still flush with the back. Time for another nail. Maybe even 2. Should be able to just reach to the back and get 8 7/8. For this, I think I'm going to nail from back here. And this part could vary a little bit depending on how wide you made your chair, how big your slats end up, but this is about 1 1/8 inch spacer. I'm just going to lay it right in there, at least to start. Again, I've got all these marked where the front is. At least to start, I want to just stack them in there, flush the back. This is the part where it might be wise just to put like one nail in there until I'm sure I get everything I want. As you can tell, I have a world of experience in making little bitty mistakes. So I've kind of learned, don't get too carried away with the nails until you're absolutely sure. All right. Da, da, da. Again, these slats are basically 2 inches wide. To be 100% honest, there's probably 1 or 2 that maybe I made a little bit narrower. So I'm actually looking at this and going, I'd kind of like to have this over about 1/4 inch or so, maybe 3/8. So I'm gonna end up adjusting this. I did the original takeoff off of a chair I'd already built, but I think I'm going to adjust this over a little bit, which is why it's a good thing I put one nail in everything. Oh, wait a minute. So this is the part where I have to just come clean and confess I had in my mind that I had 5 slats. I actually have 6. So when I put one in the middle, I messed up. So good news. I can pop them back out. I believe that, yes, I made 6. So that's why I'm not great at math. I'll get to share again that wiggle the nail out thing. That's going to be great on the ones I just put 1 in. It's going to be a little bit more challenging on the one that I put about 6 in. Not worried about putting a ding there. Now, the very first video that I ever did was for a company called Woodmaster. Been many, many years ago, and it was real poor, great information, just real poor quality. But one of the things I heard over and over again is people love this because it's so believable because you make mistakes. So I'm hoping this is making you love this video even more. So, hi, here we go. The good news is those wiggle right out. That would have been a good time to do that whole dry fit thing I was preaching about, wouldn't it? All right. It's just going to make this video a little bit longer. All right, and there we go. Now, I think the best thing to do would be take this spacer that I think is the right spacer, put it in the middle, get a pencil, and we're gonna get, so that's about 8 5/8 that way. That's way off. There's 9 1/2, 9 3/8, 9 3/8. Okay, now I'm going to put a pencil mark on either side of that spacer. Try and keep it there while I go to the back. 9 3/8. And mark both sides. And if I did that right, I should be able to put these slats on either side of that pencil mark. All right. And I am definitely only going to put one nail on each one of these this time. I was just so excited about seeing the finished product. I got a little bit out ahead of my skis, or over my skis. All right. And as soon as I put these two in, I'm going to double check my measurement a little bit. That's a little bit off. So according to that, this needs to bump over about 1/8 of an inch, which would mean that one needs to bump over about 1/8. All right. Okay, that is pretty good. I give that just a tiny tap. Now I'm going to go ahead and get really committed. Put a second nail in these. All right. One more double check on this on where I'm headed to. All right. All right, maybe we're back on track now. Kind of interesting, when I've got that straight piece in there, you can also sort of see, just how much curve there is to that seat. Okay, that's turned out a whole lot more like what I expected. All right. Well, I think that is it. We've just got to wait for probably about an hour for this glue to dry. I'll probably go back and add a few more nails, but that's it, except for cutting the top. I'm going to spin it around a little bit so you can see it. And here's the great part. As long as we keep these clamps tight, we can actually go ahead and put this in the floor and sit in it and give it a test right now since I don't like to wait. Thank you so much for persevering through this video. I really hope that whether you're a really experienced woodworker, maybe you've seen a few little tips or gotten some ideas. The thing I want to say, if you're just thinking about starting in woodworking, hey, I'm a guy from Arkansas. There's nothing here that's that complicated. I hope you're looking at it and going, I can do that. I would also like to really encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, check out all my other videos, and give some serious consideration to building this rocker with a set of the templates and plans that I can offer you. So actually, the last step in this chair is to draw this radius on the side, which I started just a little bit above the back. And you can tell I've just kind of scribbled it till it looked good to me. What I'm going to do now is take a jigsaw and cut that. Then I will, on the opposite side, I'm going to measure up exactly the same distance. I'm going to take this piece that I cut off, actually stick it over here on top of this and draw it, and that way they'll both be the same radius at the same height. But the very last thing we're going to do is I'm going to get my friend who helped me to come give this chair a test ride and see what he thinks. Because admittedly, I'm kind of biased. So tell me what you think.
Gary, I'm 6'4" and 300 pounds. You sure I can sit in this thing?
Hey, the clamps are still on it.
Ooh, that's so comfortable.
What do you think? Is that better than version 2?
That's much better than version 2.
All right.
You know the only thing I need?
What, a cup holder?
No.
Oh.
I need a grandchild on my lap.
Oh.
Then I think I'm all set. And a book in my hand.
A book in your, well, I'm going to just tell you, if you got a book in your hand, you're probably not going to go with a grandchild.
Well, that's the purpose of the book.
Oh, well, okay.
Hold the book. This is awesome. Very comfortable.
Well, good deal. So again, anybody can do this. It just takes basically just seeing the video and having the bravery to get started.